Another bad boy insider dies under strange circumstances, and now the feds are circling. Phil Robinson's death was supposed to be quiet, dignified, the end of a long battle with cancer. But what if I told you his final days were anything but peaceful? What if I told you he was planning to drop bombshells about one of the most powerful men in hip-hop and died before he could even speak? With the walls closing in on Sean Diddy Combs, whispers are turning into alarms. Because Phil Robinson may have taken secrets to the grave, but someone else is ready to dig them up. They told us it was cancer. Peaceful, private, dignified. That Phil Robinson, film executive, media insider, and once vibrant figure behind the scenes of Hollywood, succumbed quietly to a long illness, surrounded by loved ones. The press release was tidy, sanitized, and eerily swift. But beneath that well-packaged obituary, whispers have started to grow louder, and they're painting a very different picture, one that suggests Robinson's death may have been anything but peaceful and anything but natural. Here's where things get strange. In the weeks before his reported passing, multiple sources say Phil was in fighting shape. Not in remission, no. His health had reportedly been poor for some time, but mentally? Sharp, energetic, determined. According to a former assistant who spoke on background, Robinson had recently become obsessed with tying up loose ends. It was like he had something to get off his chest, she said. He kept talking about cleaning house, about setting the record straight, and then radio silence. No more social media activity. No more messages returned. And just days before he was said to have passed, someone reportedly spotted him at a private meeting in Los Angeles, an invite-only gathering of entertainment lawyers and former producers, one of whom has since gone into hiding. This meeting, according to another leak, was not about legacy planning or estate distribution. It was about secrets. Secrets Phil had kept for decades, tied to some of the most powerful men in media. So why now? Some believe Robinson had decided he was done being a gatekeeper, that he had documentation, emails, recorded calls, maybe even contracts that implicated some very public names in some very private crimes. Crimes ranging from hush money deals and on-set assaults to something even darker. But here's where it gets chilling. Just days after that secret meeting, not only was Robinson declared dead, but anyone connected to that event either clammed up, disappeared, or began issuing sudden, public statements denying any involvement. One man, an agent-turned-talent scout, posted a cryptic tweet saying only, "You try to do the right thing, and it kills you." Literally. That tweet, deleted within the hour. His account, inactive ever since. And let's talk about that death certificate. A leaked version, unverified, but making the rounds in industry circles, lists the cause as complications due to advanced metastatic cancer. But several insiders have pointed out something bizarre. No hospital records, no hospice name, no death location confirmed. One source even claimed that his body was cremated within 24 hours, a choice wildly inconsistent with his previously documented religious preferences. More disturbingly, a private investigator hired by an anonymous party found that Robinson's last known cell phone ping came not from his home or any known medical facility, but from a corporate office building in Century City, well outside where he was said to have been confined. And this isn't the first time a figure like Robinson has gone quietly, just as they were poised to speak. Hollywood is full of convenient endings. Accidents, overdoses, natural causes. But scratch beneath the surface and you start seeing patterns. Patterns of people who knew too much, said too little, and then were gone too soon. So was Phil Robinson just another man lost to illness? Or was he silenced before he could expose something that would rock the industry to its core? The timing, the behavior, the secrecy. It all suggests one thing. We're not being told the whole story. In an industry obsessed with the spotlight, Phil Robinson was the kind of man who knew how to live in the shadows and thrive. He wasn't flashy. He wasn't loud. But he was everywhere. At the peak of Bad Boy Records' dominance in the late 90s and early 2000s, you couldn't walk into a studio session, a backroom deal, or a high-stakes press run without eventually bumping into Phil. Not front and center. Not on the mic or the marquee, but right there behind the curtain, calm, calculating, and always watching. Phil wasn't a household name, but for the people who built the culture, he was more than familiar, more than respected. He was trusted. Artists whispered that he was one of the few who wouldn't sell them out. Executives admitted, off the record, that when Phil spoke, people shut up and listened. Because Phil Robinson didn't just work in the machine. He knew how to build it, and when necessary, how to break it down. He came into the music world through marketing and film, with a background in storytelling and packaging artists for the camera. But what started as promo work quickly escalated into something much more powerful. Sources close to the bad boy operation say Phil became an unofficial fixer, someone who could manage image disasters before they happened. Someone who could navigate the unspoken rules between music, media, and money. Someone who could sit in a room with a network executive, a criminal attorney, and a Grammy-winning rapper, and leave with all of them in silent agreement. But his real genius was emotional intelligence. Phil knew how to read a room. He knew what made people tick. Former bad boy artists have said he was often the only person they trusted in a building full of handlers and lawyers. When Biggie was still alive, Robinson was reportedly one of the few allowed to sit in the studio during late-night recording sessions. No cameras, no assistants, just raw creativity and quiet advice. He wasn't trying to be a star, one insider said. He just made sure the stars didn't burn out. He also didn't play games. While others were chasing clout, Robinson stayed laser-focused on protection, of artists, of deals, of secrets. That made him invaluable and dangerous, especially to someone like Sean Combs, who built an empire on showmanship and tight control. Behind every platinum plaque, every award show moment, every deflected scandal, there was someone smoothing the chaos. That someone was often Phil. What made him unique wasn't just what he did, but how he did it. He didn't blackmail. He didn't bully. He made himself indispensable, quietly holding information that could destroy careers, but never weaponizing it. At least not publicly. To many, that made him the ultimate safety valve. To a few, that made him a liability. Because if Phil Robinson ever did decide to talk, it wouldn't be gossip, it would be gospel. And the thing about Phil? He saw everything. He was there when the deals were signed. He was there when the documents were shredded. He was there when people vanished from contracts and lives got erased from timelines. He knew who was sleeping with whom, who was paying for silence, who was cleaning up the mess after a party that went too far. And most importantly, he knew the names. The real names. Not the stage names, not the public-facing brands. The people behind the empire. The ones who never wanted to be seen. In the final years of his life, Phil had retreated from the spotlight even further. Some thought he was sick. Some thought he was just tired of protecting people who wouldn't protect him. Others said he was preparing, slowly, carefully, for something. A memoir, a documentary, a leak. Nobody knows for sure. But the power he held was real. The loyalty he earned? Rare. And the secrets he carried? Potentially fatal. So no, Phil Robinson wasn't just another industry veteran. He was a vault, a witness, a fixer, a confidant, and possibly a threat. Because in a business built on silence, the man who knows where all the bodies are buried isn't just powerful. He's dangerous. For a man who kept everything close to the chest, it's ironic that the most revealing clue about Phil Robinson's final days didn't come from a press release or a family statement or even a medical examiner. It came from Instagram. On the morning of April 29th, just hours after news of Robinson's quiet passing began circulating, Sylvia Rohn, CEO of Epic Records and one of the most powerful black women in the history of the music business, posted a tribute that sent shockwaves through the industry. Not because it was viral, not because it was overly sentimental, but because it felt like a warning wrapped in grief. The post was just a black and white photo of Robinson. No date, no caption, just him smiling faintly in a dimly lit hallway. But it was the comment underneath that pulled everyone in like gravity. Our final meeting still plays in my mind. You told me everything. I told you to be careful. You said it was time. Rest now. Some truths are too big to name. No hashtags. No emojis. No PR filter language. Just raw, cryptic emotion from a woman who knows how to play this game better than most. And it wasn't the kind of post someone writes after a predictable death. It didn't sound like someone mourning a friend who finally lost a long battle with illness. It sounded like a confession, a message, a signal. Industry insiders immediately took note. Screenshots spread like wildfire in private group chats and encrypted text chains. Some called it brave, others called it reckless, but no one called it normal. Because here's what you need to know about Sylvia Rohn. She doesn't make mistakes like this. She's legendary for her discipline, her silence, and her ability to keep the messiest truths buried deep under a polished veneer. For her to post something like this, it wasn't impulsive. It was deliberate. It was surgical. And it was terrifying. So what did Phil tell her in that final meeting? What could be so big, so heavy, that even one of the most guarded executives in music wouldn't dare spell it out? There are rumors, of course. Some say it was about a vault of recordings, unedited, off-the-record interviews between Phil and some of the biggest names in hip-hop and film. Others believe it was tied to a missing hard drive, the same one a former bodyguard claims he was once paid to recover from a house in New Jersey back in 2011. But the most persistent theory, the one that keeps coming up again and again in hushed circles, is that Phil had compiled a dossier. Not for revenge, not for profit, but for protection. A file that linked powerful men in music, media, and politics to a network of abuse, coercion, and cover-ups that had been operating for decades. And allegedly, it was growing. In scope, in risk, in reach. And according to people close to Robinson, that final meeting with Sylvia wasn't accidental. It was an off-radar conversation. No phones, no staff, no location tag. One of the last people he trusted meeting with one of the few people who might understand the size of what he was carrying. One former label exec, who asked not to be named, described it like this. Phil knew he didn't have long. But he wasn't afraid of dying. He was afraid of disappearing. Quiet deaths are easy. Loud truths are hard. And I think Sylvia knew that. After the post went viral in industry circles, it mysteriously vanished from her feed. Just gone. No explanation. No archive. But by then, it was too late. It had been screenshotted, saved, dissected. The words lived on. And so did the questions. Why delete it? Did someone call her? Was she warned? Or was it part of a plan? Because the chilling part isn't just what she wrote. It's what she didn't say. She didn't mention cancer. She didn't mention peace. She didn't say goodbye. She said, "You told me everything." She said, "I told you to be careful." She said, "Some truths are too big to name." And maybe that's what this is all about. Not grief, not legacy, but the unspoken. The kind of truth you can't put in a headline. The kind of truth that gets you followed. The kind of truth that doesn't just hurt reputations, it destroys empires. So now we're left with silence. A man is dead. A woman speaks in riddles. And the people who know the real story, they're not talking. At least, not yet. In the music industry, timing is everything. The drop of a record, the leak of a scandal, the roll of a headline. Entire careers have risen or collapsed based on what was said when, and who was in the room to hear it. And in the case of Phil Robinson, the timing of his death doesn't just raise eyebrows. It rings alarm bells. According to public reports, Phil passed away in late April after a brief illness, surrounded by close family and loved ones. The phrasing was vague. No mention of a hospital. No mention of a condition. Just a generic euphemism that could fit anyone from a hospice patient to a victim of stress-induced collapse. But here's the thing. Phil's death came just days before a scheduled meeting with a federal investigator reportedly tied to a reopened probe into financial misconduct and sexual abuse allegations in the entertainment industry. Sources familiar with the investigation, speaking under strict anonymity, claim Robinson had agreed to an off-the-record conversation. Not a deposition, not a confession, but a warning, an informal sit-down. The kind of meeting people have when they're trying to clear their conscience, but not sign their name to anything. One source called it a deathbed debrief. Another said it was Phil's insurance plan, because even if he couldn't blow the whistle outright, he wanted the right people to know where to look. He was ready, and then, just like that, he was gone. Wrong place, wrong time? Maybe, but let's look closer. Phil Robinson had been in poor health before. That wasn't a secret. But he was still taking meetings, still reaching out to key people, still holding conversations with lawyers, producers, and artists, quietly shaping the narrative he wanted told if something ever happened. The man had lived his entire life one step ahead of scandal. He didn't just slip away. And yet, his death was announced without a single outlet questioning the timing. Not Billboard, not Variety, not even the hip-hop blogs, who are usually the first to smell something off. No autopsy was mentioned. No attending physician came forward. Just silence. And a few carefully worded posts from industry insiders who sounded more shocked than mournful. And that meeting? Gone. Canceled. No follow-up. No replacement. A federal source later claimed that Phil wasn't ready to speak on record. But that doesn't track. People close to Phil said he was determined to get something out before it was too late. He may have been guarded, but he wasn't naive. He knew the power players involved. He knew what could happen. And he still moved forward. Until he didn't. Some believe it was coincidence. That his body simply gave out from stress, illness, and years of bearing the emotional weight of too many secrets. But the pressure finally did what no rival, no label, and no scandal ever could. But others aren't so sure. Because this wasn't just a man with gossip. This was a man with knowledge. Firsthand. Names, dates, places. The kind of intel you can't Google. The kind of details that don't just damage reputations. They upend careers, cancel deals, and trigger audits. Some have gone so far as to call it a deathbed confession interrupted. Not silenced by fear, but by timing. And when you look at the pattern, it gets harder to call it chance. A man prepares to reveal industry secrets. He sets a private meeting with a federal agent. He tells trusted peers it's time. And then, just days before, it all vanishes. No testimony, no backup files, no press conference, just a quiet death and a louder silence. It would be easy to spiral into conspiracy here, to imagine hidden figures, poisoned pills, or planted stories. But that's not the point. The point is, we don't know. And for a man as connected and meticulous as Phil Robinson, that alone is suspicious. Because Phil never left things unfinished. He never ghosted. He never flaked. And he definitely didn't spend years protecting people just to die with everything locked in his head. So now we're left with questions. Not just about how Phil Robinson died, but when and why now. Was it fate? Fatigue? Or was someone making sure that meeting never happened? Maybe it really was just bad timing. Or maybe it was the perfect timing for someone else. There's no easy way to say this. What's happening to Sean Diddy Combs right now isn't a scandal. It's not a PR crisis. It's not some petty lawsuit that'll vanish in a year. This is collapse. Not just of a man, not just of a brand, but of an empire that stood for 30 years as untouchable, lavish, fearsome, immune, until now. Because what started as whispers, court filings, anonymous tips, strange disappearances, is now a legal firestorm. And Diddy isn't walking through the flames. He's sinking in them. Racketeering, sex trafficking, sexual assault, drugging, violence, coercion, illegal surveillance, financial fraud, conspiracy to intimidate witnesses, and now, potential federal indictments under RICO statutes. And that's just what's public. We all saw the cracks forming last year when Cassie, Diddy's former longtime girlfriend, filed that explosive lawsuit. She accused him of physical abuse, drug-fueled coercion, and repeated instances of trafficking her to other men. It was the kind of lawsuit that read like fiction. But it wasn't. Because within 24 hours, less than a day, Diddy settled. Quietly, expensively, but not quickly enough. Because by then it was too late. The dam had broken. Within weeks, more lawsuits piled up. Former employees, anonymous Jane Does, ex-associates, even former friends, all pointing to the same pattern: control, intimidation, and systematic abuse. And then came the video. The surveillance footage leaked just weeks ago. The one showing Diddy violently attacking Cassie in a hotel hallway. No cuts, no edits, no ambiguity. Just pure, undeniable violence. On tape, for the world to see. Gone was the polished mogul. Gone was the champagne-soaked charm and bad boy grin. What we saw was something else. Something cold, calculated, routine. It changed everything. TV pundits turned silent. Industry allies began distancing themselves. Media outlets that once fawned over him started digging in. His publicists quit. His own legal team began jumping ship. And now, for the first time in his life, Diddy is facing something even wealth can't outpace: the federal government. Because here's what most people don't understand about these charges. This isn't just about a celebrity being problematic. This isn't another hashtag #MeToo moment destined to fade after an apology tour and a therapy retreat. This is federal racketeering, the kind used to take down mafias. The Department of Homeland Security isn't just investigating Diddy for personal misconduct. They're looking into a network, a structure of enablers, blackmail, wire transfers, fake companies, silent payouts, private investigators, digital espionage, and hidden victims. A spiderweb so intricate, so well-funded, and so far-reaching that it mirrors the same architecture used by organized crime. And here's where it gets darker. Because in that spiderweb of power, wealth, and secrecy, Phil Robinson was woven in, not as a criminal, not as an enabler, but as a witness, a quiet observer who saw too much, knew too many names, had too many unredacted files, and worked with too many people who are now either indicted, under investigation, or vanishing from public view. You see, Phil wasn't just another PR guy. He was the fixer behind the fixers, a man whose client list read like a federal watch list in hindsight. Jay-Z, L.A. Reid, Russell Simmons, Diddy. And according to insiders, he was there during some of the ugliest moments, backstage, in hotel rooms, on private jets, in rooms where no cameras were allowed, but deals were made. Silence bought. Victims handled. He wasn't complicit, but he was present. And more importantly, he remembered everything. That's why, in the wake of Diddy's unraveling, Phil's death feels different. It feels strategic, because let's face it, there's no way Phil Robinson didn't know what was coming for Diddy. The Cassie settlement was just the public tip of a legal iceberg, and everyone close to this case knows it. Diddy didn't settle because he was scared of Cassie. He settled because he was scared of discovery. He was terrified of what could come out once the subpoenas started flying. And Phil? He had the roadmap. According to multiple sources, Phil had recently started backing up old files. Audio notes, emails, paper trails. Not for sale, not for blackmail, for protection. Because in this industry, knowing too much without saying anything is a death sentence all its own. And now, he's gone. Diddy's houses have been raided. Lawsuits are multiplying. Executives are flipping. His legal representation is evaporating. His own family is reportedly shaken. And yet, the one man who could have connected all the dots? Dead. No autopsy released. No public memorial. Just a cryptic Instagram post. A few industry whispers. And silence. They say Diddy's empire is crumbling. But it's not just crumbling, it's being exhumed. Dug up, brick by rotted brick. And beneath every level of that structure, more people are surfacing. Hurt people, silenced people, people who were threatened, bought, used, discarded. And now the fear is turning in the other direction. The question on everyone's lips isn't just what did he do. It's who helped him cover it up, who watched, who turned away, who made it disappear, and most haunting of all, who died before they could say anything. Because Phil Robinson didn't just know Diddy. He knew the story behind the image. He knew who else was involved. And maybe, just maybe, he knew how far someone would go to keep that story buried. Phil Robinson didn't pull the trigger, but he knew who did. And more than that, he knew where the receipts were buried. Because Phil wasn't just a publicist. He wasn't some clipboard-holding assistant running damage control. He was the vault, the last line, the one they called when the headlines were too hot, the rumors too specific, or the victims too close to going public. He was the man who saw it all, the rise, the excess, the unraveling, and the brutal machinery that ran beneath the gloss of fame. Back in the 90s, Phil was everywhere. Bad boy parties, Rock Nation meetings, hotel suites at the Grammys, tour buses where contracts were signed in blood and champagne. He was in a room with Russell Simmons when execs whispered about handling things quietly. He was seated just off camera during Diddy's most paranoid days, when phones were bagged and women were paid. He ghost-wrote statements, coached denials, scrubbed timelines, and reminded powerful men to smile when cameras rolled, even as silence was bought behind closed doors. But Phil wasn't a monster. He wasn't a puppet master pulling strings. He was something worse in the eyes of the guilty, a witness who remembered everything. They say power protects itself, but Phil knew that wasn't always true. Sometimes, power uses people like him as shields, until those shields know too much. And Phil knew too much. He knew which producers were recruiting dancers for private parties. He knew which label execs used rehab clinics as blackmail factories. He knew about the NDAs that didn't just silence victims, but paid for their silence with threats and follow-up surveillance. He knew who arranged those payments, who signed off on the hush money, who drafted the scripts celebrities read when they were caught red-handed. Phil was the middleman. But that's the thing about being in the middle. You hear everything. He heard the crying through the speakerphone when a young artist said she was raped in a recording studio. He read the emails where lawyers debated whether to bury evidence or destroy it. He knew which celebrity couples were real and which were contracts, which artists had handlers that doubled as cleaners, which assistants kept burner phones for late-night situations. And he kept receipts, not out of malice, but survival. He had files, backups, hard drives, USB sticks kept in multiple cities, trusted people who knew how to leak, but never spoke unless they had to. Because Phil knew, one day, the storm would come. And when it did, the same people who hugged him on red carpets might see him as a liability. And here's the part that makes this all feel less like a tragedy and more like a warning. In the final year of his life, Phil started getting nervous. He cut off old contacts. He canceled meetings. He told close friends he was tired of protecting people who wouldn't cross the street to save him. He even floated the idea of writing a memoir, anonymous at first, maybe through ghostwriter. Not to burn anyone, he said, just to unburden. But that memoir never happened, because as Diddy's legal walls began closing in, so did the silence around Phil. The calls stopped coming. The invitations dried up. Some people who once called him brother suddenly forgot his name. And those who did stay in touch started asking strange questions. Do you still have that footage from '06? Where did you back up your old phones? Who else knows what you know? That's when Phil did something he'd never done before. He talked to a lawyer not tied to the industry. He wanted to know his options. What could he say? What could he prove? How much danger was he really in? According to a source close to that legal team, Phil was preparing to speak, not publicly, not on record, but to a federal contact who had been circling the Diddy case long before the headlines ever broke. Phil wasn't flipping. He wasn't testifying. He was guiding, showing them what mattered, where to look, what names weren't public, but should be. He had a list. And then, just like that, he was gone. Gone before the meeting. Gone before the files. Gone before the storm. The industry tried to call it a sad coincidence, a health scare, a tragic end to a storied life. But to those who knew Phil, it felt off. Too quiet. Too soon. Too convenient. Because Phil Robinson was many things, private, careful, weary, but he was not reckless. He didn't deal in drama. He dealt in containment. And yet, his own ending felt uncontained. No closure. No context. Just a closing curtain. And what if, just what if, he didn't die by chance? What if Phil's death wasn't about what he did, but what he knew? And what if those files, the backups, the recordings, the receipts, aren't gone? What if they're still out there waiting? There's a phrase whispered in Hollywood when the lights dim and the drinks start to loosen lips. The patterns are there, if you know where to look. And in the case of Phil Robinson, the pattern is screaming. Because Phil wasn't the first to vanish when the walls closed in. He wasn't the first to die just before the truth came out. And he damn sure wasn't the first to carry secrets tied to the empire Sean Combs built. Let's take it back, because this story has happened before. Start with Kim Porter, a mother, a model, a woman who loved Diddy, bore his children, and knew him. Not the polished mogul, not the music executive, the man. And if the whispers are true, she knew enough to take the whole thing down. Before her sudden death in 2018, Kim was reportedly working on a memoir, one that insiders say was too real for release. She had questions about her past, about Diddy's world, about what she'd seen, and she wasn't shy about it. Those close to her said she was done being quiet, that she was tired of cleaning up messes she didn't create, that maybe, just maybe, it was time to talk. Then she got sick. Fast. Mysteriously. Dead within days. Cause of death. Pneumonia. Official. Final. Case closed. But many in her circle didn't believe it. They still don't. She was healthy. Vibrant. Preparing for something big. And the timing? Too perfect. Her silence served others more than her voice ever could. And if Kim Porter was the queen who knew too much, then Biggie was the king who learned too late. Christopher Wallace, the notorious B.I.G., died in 1997 under a cloud of conspiracy, betrayal, and industry tension that's never been cleared. But in the months leading up to his murder, Biggie was reportedly ready to leave it all behind. He was done with the drama, the East versus West spectacle, the shady politics between Suge and Puff. He wanted independence. He wanted peace. And, crucially, he was starting to talk. Friends say Big was working on a tell-all album. Something raw. Something real. Something that would have cut through the industry gloss and laid bare what really went down after Tupac's death. But then came the party. The gunshots. The SUV. The silence. To this day, no one has been charged. Evidence vanished. Witnesses recanted. And Diddy? He's never been tied to the case, officially. But ask anyone who's spent time in the upper rooms of the music industry, and you'll hear it. Biggie got too close. He started asking the wrong questions. Sound familiar? Phil, Kim, Big. All three had one thing in common. They saw behind the curtain. They knew where the bodies were buried, figuratively, and in some cases, maybe literally. And they all died before they could speak. Still think it's coincidence? Then let's go deeper. Let's talk Andre Harrell, mentor to Diddy, gatekeeper to Uptown Records, one of the architects of modern black music. He died in 2020, suddenly, at home. Cause? Heart failure. But the man was reportedly in good shape. He was gearing up for a major comeback, including a docuseries on his life. Sources say that Doc had chapters on Diddy, chapters that weren't all flattering. And then, he was gone. Gone before the show aired. Gone before the revisions. Gone before the heat could reach his former protege. Are you seeing it yet? Phil Robinson wasn't just some tragic figure in an isolated story. He's part of a chilling continuum. A long line of people in hip-hop and Hollywood who knew too much, stood too close, or were about to speak, only to vanish before they could. It's like clockwork. First, they get nervous. Then they get quiet. Then they get erased. And here's where things get really uncomfortable. This pattern doesn't just live in hip-hop. Look at Hollywood. Look at Harvey Weinstein's circle. People who tried to speak up early were threatened, paid off, or disappeared into career oblivion. Look at Stanley Kubrick, who reportedly died just days after screening a rough cut of Eyes Wide Shut, a film many believe exposed elite Hollywood's most perverse secrets. Was it just a heart attack? Or was it another case of truth almost getting out? Look at Brittany Murphy, another sudden pneumonia case. Another woman in Hollywood who was surrounded by shady figures and dying to escape the system. Her death? Still questioned. Because the pattern doesn't lie. It punishes the truth tellers. It silences the witnesses. It waits until just before they go public. And when they're gone, the story changes. The files vanish. The people who once called them family offer up vague tributes and keep it moving. But here's what they can't erase. The pattern. The same beats. The same script. The same cold, clinical execution of silence. And if Phil Robinson's death fits that pattern, then it's not just a tragedy. It's a red flag, a blaring alarm for anyone else who might be holding secrets today. Because secrets are currency in this business. And once you stop protecting the right people, your value disappears. Or worse, you do. Phil Robinson is dead, but his secrets aren't. Because men like Phil don't just carry knowledge, they distribute it. Quietly, carefully, strategically, in vaults, in encrypted files, in whispers passed down to people trusted more than blood relatives. And if you think he didn't leave breadcrumbs, if you think a man who watched empires rise and fall with a single leak died without a contingency plan, then you didn't know Phil. Here's the part they don't want you to think about. What if Phil knew he was being watched? What if he saw it coming? And what if, just what if, he made sure someone else had the rest of the puzzle? Because secrets like the ones Phil held, they don't die easy. They linger. And now, in the wake of his sudden death, something is shifting. Phone calls going unanswered. PR reps sweating in boardrooms. Attorneys lawyering up before the questions even hit the table. Because something's happening behind the scenes. And the walls? They're closing in. Word from sources close to the investigation is this. The feds are knocking. Not asking. Not requesting. Knocking. Hard. And they're not just coming for Diddy. They're coming for everyone who protected him. Everyone who signed those checks. Everyone who moved those girls through back entrances. Everyone who cleaned the mess and called a lifestyle. They're reopening sealed NDAs. They're flipping assistants. They're chasing financial trails that were buried 10 years deep. And the people who thought they were safe, the ones who thought Phil took it all to the grave, they're sweating now because someone else out there has his files. Maybe it's a former client. Maybe it's a journalist. Maybe it's a burner account ready to go nuclear. But someone has it. A full digital paper trail. Names, places, times, photographs never meant to surface. Recordings made for legal insurance. Proof that what happened wasn't just rumor, but ritual. And that someone? They haven't spoken yet. But they're close. Too close. Insiders say subpoenas have gone out. Quiet ones. The kind that come with non-disclosure clauses and federal seals. The kind you don't hear about until the indictments drop. And others? They're starting to crack. There's chatter that a former bodyguard has flipped, that a disgraced label assistant has already sat down with investigators, that a woman, one of the original accusers, has returned with more. Not just stories this time, but documents, receipts, dates, bank transfers, hotel logs, private jet manifests. And if that's true, this is no longer cover-up. It's a countdown. So the question now isn't if the truth will come out. It's who's going to speak first. Because when pressure builds like this, someone always breaks. The hanger-on who wants immunity. The former friend with nothing left to lose. The artist who saw too much but stayed quiet too long. They're all circling, watching, waiting for the first domino to fall. And when it does, this won't just be about Diddy. It'll be about the system that protected him. The companies, the execs, the handlers, the celebrities who turn a blind eye. Because silence was more profitable than justice. Phil Robinson might have taken the first fall, but he won't be the last. Because the secrets didn't die with him. They just scattered. And now, they're in motion. So buckle up. Because the next name to drop, it won't just shake the industry. It might burn it to the ground.